Sleep regressions are not fun, and unfortunately, they happen quite often throughout your baby's first year. And perhaps even more unfortunately, they will also happen at times with your toddler. Today, we're going to talk about the sleep regression that happens sometime around 8 to 10 months old. The good news is there's typically only one regression in this 8 to 10 month old range. So, that's less often than it was with younger babies. So that's the good news. The bad news is there is one that happens sometime between 8 to 10 months old, and you don't really know exactly when it will hit, but it's going to hit sometime. Some more good news is that this 8 to 10 month old sleep regression is not as bad as the one that happened at 4 months old. It's not as infamous. It doesn't necessarily affect every baby in a very noticeable way. So it's possible that you're really not even going to notice this happen, but if you're watching this video, you're either someone who likes to be prepared or you're in the thick of it. So let's get to it. But first, hello, my name is Valerie. I blog at babywisemom.com, and I've been blogging there since the year 2007, and I love helping parents love parenthood. I have 4 children who currently range in age from 12 to 19 years old. Now, by the time your baby's in this 8 to 10 month old range, it can have been a while since you've had a sleep regression, and so you might have kind of forgotten about it, and you might be thinking like, whoa, like why is my baby suddenly not sleeping well? Like, what happened? And you might have forgotten, like, oh, this could be a sleep regression, because this is nice. It's been a while since it's been a sleep regression. Like in the first while, it seemed like there was always like, oh, a sleep regression. And we kind of quickly forget about difficulty and adversity. And so we very quickly put those sleep regressions behind us and forget that those exist until this happens. And then we have to be reminded like, oh yeah, sleep regression. So first up, when is the 8 to 10 month old sleep regression? I mean, it's obviously sometime between 8 to 10 months old, and it can happen anytime in that time range. Hopefully you will just face one during this 8 to 10 month old range. It's possible to have more than one, but hopefully there's just one true sleep regression. That doesn't mean there'll only be one time you have sleep problems, because sleep problems can come up for a variety of reasons. Sleep regression is just one of them. But hopefully there will just be one sleep regression during your 8 to 10 month old range. So of course, something we all want to know whenever something difficult is happening in our lives is how long will this last? And we all want to know how long will the sleep regression last? And that can just vary depending on what the main cause is for the sleep regression and how quickly you identify and help your baby out with that. And then also if there are other things that can be affecting poor sleep. So what are some common causes for sleep regressions during this age range? There's always going to be a reason your baby isn't sleeping well, and sometimes it's just the regression. With like a very young baby on witching hour, they're just not sleeping well because of the witching hour, and there's really nothing you can do to stop the witching hour. It's more of what can you do to help your baby get through the witching hour with as much grace as possible. And then during that 4-month sleep regression, a lot of times you just have to write it out. So sometimes a sleep regression is just, this is a developmental leap. Your baby's working on some sort of new skill that is therefore interrupting your baby's sleep cycles. And so you just have to wait for that to complete and your baby to get through that growth and development, and then they sleep better. But with that said, most times there are things you can do within a regression to help out. So a really common reason for poor sleep with this 8 to 10 month old range is your baby learning a new skill. And common new skills in this range can be sitting up. Typically babies are able to sit up before this, but if they haven't mastered sitting up on their own yet, they're going to during this range. A lot of babies during this range will be mastering crawling if they haven't yet, getting up on all fours, moving around. and some will start standing. And that can be a huge disruption during sleep because the crib is a really easy place for a baby to stand up. They've got a lot of things to grab to help pull themselves up to be able to stand. It's a great spot for them to practice. And so they might be working on that instead of sleeping because this is a prime opportunity for that practice. Sometimes babies can also be practicing small things like fine motor skills, verbal skills. They might be practicing speaking. So there's just a lot of they're always learning, gaining and achieving, which is great. And sometimes that sleep time is just this prime time for them to want to work on these skills. I do have a post and a video all about helping your child to get over working on these new skills. So if your baby is working on new skills and that's interrupting sleep, make sure you check one or both of those out. Another really common cause for sleep issues at this age range is teething. Most babies will get at least a tooth during this age range, and that can disrupt their sleep. Some babies are not really affected by teething. It doesn't bother them. Sometimes the first tooth really bothers them, and then after that, they're fine until they hit molars or canines. So if your baby really struggles with the first tooth, like, don't despair. That doesn't mean that every single tooth is going to be a major sleep issue. It's very common for the first one to be a problem. That's their first time experiencing that kind of pain. And so once they've done it once though, they're usually a little better, and you are probably a little better identifying that they're having some teething pain and helping them through that. So if your baby is sleeping poorly because of teething pain, then help alleviate that pain so that they can sleep. Another really common cause at this age is separation anxiety. A lot of babies get separation anxiety in this age range, and they just, this is a developmental thing. They start to understand until they understand object permanence, then they can really stress out when you're not there. Some things that can help with that, just on a high level, one is them having independent playtime, because then they, are used to, you leave, you come back, you leave, you come back. And I am capable of being alone. It's okay for me to be alone. They're used to being alone while they're awake. And so being alone as they fall asleep is not a big deal. So if you'd like to learn more about independent playtime, I have a lot of posts and videos on that also. And then of course, something else that helps is just playing games like peekaboo, or covering a toy up with a blanket and then removing it to help them develop the skill and learn oh, I now understand that objects exist even if I can't see them. Another common reason for poor sleep at this age is just that a schedule change is needed. Babies need their schedules adjusted and shifted often, as you are definitely used to by this point. So it's always wise to consider, do we need a nap change? Do you need a wake time length change? Do you need a bedtime change? A morning wake up time change? You may need a tweak somewhere in the schedule. A huge cause for poor sleep around this age and beyond into the 10 to 12 month age range is not enough physical and or mental stimulation. So this can happen if your baby is not getting enough physical movement. So if you're not giving your baby enough time, on the floor playing, then they're not getting enough gross motor movement. They need to be able to move their muscles and move around. So if you're always putting your baby into a exerciser or a playpen or playing at the high chair, you need to give them opportunity for that gross movement too. They need the big movement. A jumperoo can be good for getting that exercise, but they also need floor time. And then they also just need mental stimulation, and that can sometimes be as simple as you buy a new toy that is more on their level. As they get older, make sure that you have toys that are age appropriate. You need toys that are challenging to them and mentally stimulate them. And aren't just so easy to play with. And we also are so used to protecting that baby's stimulation levels to make sure they don't get overly tired and struggle sleeping, that we continue keeping that same level of protection as we did when they were young babies. And as they get older, they need some of that stimulation. They need the sights and the smells and the activity. because they need to continue taking in and learning. And while you sleep, your brain processes what it learned, and during sleep is when it makes sense of the world. And so when a baby is exposed to things it needs to make sense of, then your baby needs sleep in order to do that. And so if they're not getting enough, then it's just not creating enough like sleep pressure, enough need for that sleep. You can also have poor sleep because of a wonder week, and you can also have poor sleep because of the sun. So maybe if your baby is struggling with napping, maybe the sun didn't keep them awake when they were younger, but now napping with the sun is a struggle. Or maybe they're waking up early in the morning because the sun is up. And so maybe it's time to consider blackout curtains. All right, we talked about how to help with all of these problems to some level. Let's dive in a little deeper on some of these things. So with new skills, not every single new skill is going to disrupt your baby's sleep. So that's the good news. And you're not going to have sleep problems every time your baby's learning something new, but there will probably be at least one thing in your baby's life that really disrupts their sleep. So if you notice your baby's not sleeping well and your baby is doing that skill, like trying to do that skill during nap time, then make sure you're giving plenty of time to practice that skill during your baby's awake time, during your baby's playtime. So if your baby is trying to stand up constantly during nap time, give your baby plenty of time during playtime to practice that. And you can even go to the crib during playtime and practice that skill so that that novelty is worn off. It's not so exciting. In that case, you would just keep all the lights on and stay in the room with your baby, maybe turn on some music and let your baby practice standing up and sitting down and standing up and getting down. Your baby is smart enough to understand, this is not nap time. And when you remove the novelty from something, then they stop trying to do it when they get the opportunity. So if they get plenty of time to practice that standing in the crib during awake time, then they're less interested during nap time because it's I've already done that. That's not that exciting. Let's talk about some common schedule changes that do need to happen during this age range. So one big one is moving to 2 naps a day. If your baby is not yet at 2 naps a day and you're having some sleep problems, then definitely consider, do we need to move to 2 naps? The range for moving from 3 to 2 naps is 6 months to 10 months, and the average is 8 months. Most babies do it around 8 months old. So if you have a 9-month-old with 3 naps a day, you strongly want to consider, do we need to move to 2 naps a day? You also might need to change your wake time length or wake window. So you might just need, which will naturally happen if you drop a nap, but you also might just need a little bit more time before that first nap. So remember, wake windows, wake time length, they're always shifting as your baby gets older and older. So always be thinking do we need to add, even just 5 minutes can make the difference. You also want to think about your baby's sleep environment. So, maybe your younger baby was fine without a sound machine, but now that they're getting older and more curious, maybe you need a sound machine to block out what's happening in the house while it's nap time, because they're more aware and they're oh, I hear this sound. That means this is happening and I'd really like to be a part of that. So I want to be awake and not taking a nap. So think about okay, we've made it without a sound machine, but maybe now it's time for the sound machine. We've made it without blackout curtains, but maybe now we need blackout curtains. If you've never done sleep training, it's time. This is time to do it, time to help your baby make sure they can sleep independently. That will help them be able to sleep better. You also might need to consider sleep props that you might need to get rid of. Perhaps the pacifier is too much of a problem, although I will say most babies with a pacifier at this age, that's not the big issue. That is more of a huge issue around 3 to 4 months old up until maybe 6 months old, when the baby can get the pacifier and put it back in their mouth. But if you have any sleep props that you think could be leading to a problem, that's something else to consider. All right, and the Wonder Week. There is a big Wonder Week that starts around 36 to 40 weeks old. So in that time range, you can have Wonder Week sleep issues. So Wonder Weeks are things where you just do what you can to get your baby to sleep, and then once the Wonder Week's over, they go back. So just remember that 4-month sleep period. If your baby struggled with sleep around 4 months old, leading up to 4 months old, this is that same kind of situation. Do your best to make sure your baby can sleep, but don't stress about it, because once the Wonder Week's over, they go back to what they were before. Okay, that wraps up our discussion on the 8 to 10-month-old sleep regression. If you need more details on any of this, I do have a very detailed blog post with even more information on this video, so make sure you check that out. If you're not watching this on the blog, I will have it linked in the description so you can get to it. As always, if you have questions, leave them in the comments and I will answer. And thanks for watching and have a great day. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this information and would like more, make sure you subscribe so that you will be notified every time I release a new video.